Hey, soccer fans, this is Nick here on the Feed the Fire podcast, talking to you about all things MLS and Chicago Fire. This upcoming weekend, the Chicago Fire travel to the nation's capital to take on DC United in a rematch from their home opener this season, where DC pulled out a last minute bicycle kick that looped over goalkeeper Chris Brady's head to draw the game at 2-2. We're going to talk a little bit about what happened last time and look forward and see what to expect against this matchup from two very different teams from the beginning of the season, that's for sure. Also, we're going to just add a few more comments to our new stadium announcement discussion that we had earlier in the week. Make sure you go back and check out the prior episode wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on the Glass House Soccer YouTube page to kind of get a breakdown of all the details, some of my initial thoughts, as well as some of the other fan reactions that have been put out there initially. I do want to open the show today, though, with an email from Dan, who writes in about the new stadium and his thoughts on it. And Dan, thank you so much for writing in. And if anyone else wants to get a hold of me, you can find me on social media at Glasshouse Soccer or via email glasshousesoccer@gmail.com. So here's what Dan says. Dan says, the stadium location is fairly close to the place where the Great Chicago Fire started. Maybe the supporters could march from the Memorial Flame to the stadium for opening day and the game closest to October 8th. I'm going to interject here because that's a fantastic idea. Dan actually sent me a snippet from Google Maps of where the Great Chicago Fire started at 558 West DeKoven Street, which is only 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 or 6, maybe 7 blocks from where the proposed stadium could be going, depending on where they build it. If not, maybe a block or two more. But that doesn't seem like a wild thing to do. The only problem is you're walking down Roosevelt Road potentially, or Canal Street, or Clark Street, and there could be some potential for some collisions with traffic there, figuratively and literally. But I think it would be something cool if they could organize it and figure it out, maybe for the stadium opener. So Dan continues, we'll also have to see how the development proceeds as Roosevelt is elevated over Wells and Clark. There you go. Another concern there. I hope we can get a metro station by the station like the Sox have. And yeah, that would be fantastic. The better public transport to get in and out of the city and to get to and from the stadium, the better. And I should say the more the better. But there's also in the FAQ section over at dearchicago.com, where the Fire put out their announcement with Joe Mansueto's letter, you can learn a little bit about the closest L stops. It looks like there are a few. I haven't looked at a map in the area yet, but it looks like there are a few within a reasonable walking distance from the stadium. Dan also says he likes the idea to dye the river red. That was something I put out on social media. Seemed to get a pretty good response from all the Fire fans as well as Chicago fans. I think that would be a lot of fun if they could get the south branch of the river there dyed red for the home opener or on special occasions. But here's where the conversation really kicks off here. Dan says, the 22,000 number worries me. I hope the stadium is expandable because between the shiny new thing status and the assumed continued improvement, I think he means of the team, that will drive attendance and we're going to see ticket prices increase. And that is absolutely a valid concern, a reasonable concern. And if you go over onto the Chicago Fire Reddit page, there's a huge discussion of this going on right now as well. So the idea is, or I should say the question is, whether 22,000 seats is enough of a capacity for a Chicago Fire team who is becoming a better run organization, putting out a better product on the field, expanding from a soccer perspective with the academies, the second team, the training facilities, all those sort of things, fire pitch, whatever it is, as well as the United States becoming more open to soccer with, they're calling it the Summer of Soccer this year, with the Club World Cup, with the Gold Cup, with World Cup next year, with Women's World Cup in 2031. That was recently announced that the U.S. and Mexico are jointly hosting the Women's World Cup. So with all of this potential for growth, why are we only building a stadium for 22,000? Well, first of all, if you look at average attendance over the last several years, let me see if I can pull up the chart here. It is just under, or not the last several years. If you look at it over the last year per game, someone put this chart out there, it is like at or just under 20,000. Now, of course, you have the big jumps when they play Inter Miami, whether with or without Messi. You have jumps for the home opener. You have jumps for afternoon games, matinees. But the vast majority of the attendance over the last year or so has been between that 18 and 20,000. Additionally, it's been noted that a lot of free tickets are given away. There are a lot of youth teams that fill up the north side of Soldier Field right now, and I could imagine seeing those ticket giveaways lessen depending on the amount of purchase tickets, season tickets, things of that nature. And as I said in the prior episode, I expect to see a lot of suites, luxury boxes, all that sort of thing that maybe isn't being considered in these 22,000 capacity. Maybe it is. I don't know how they calculate it. But I would imagine that there's going to be, closer to 24,000 actual people in the stadium on a full sold out game day. Additionally, they have talked about how they can expand the seating depending on the event that is there, whether it's a concert or some other sporting event that may be hosted, such as a rugby match. So there probably are some ways to finagle a couple extra thousand seats in that stadium should the need arise. But what you don't want to do is overbuild and then not be able to have a good environment and not financially support the stadium when there is a downturn of attendance. And I don't want to get into the whole discussion about should the MLS change their schedule. I want to get into that again. But in the event that the schedule is changed, if there is a projected drop in attendance because of the winter to spring schedule instead of the spring to fall schedule, then that could change attendance numbers as well. I think 22,000 is a very doable stadium, very good for a game day performance. I think as far as capacity, getting people in and out of that area, it is a good number. We see some of the logistical issues of things that go on in the museum campus, especially on game days, whether it's the Fire, the Bears, or any other event that's there. So I think from a lot of senses, the 22,000 makes sense. Also, if you look at other soccer stadiums, MLS soccer specific stadiums, that's about where they're being built. They are being built in that 20 to 25,000 range. I think there's maybe a couple 18 or 19,000 ones that are recently built. So I think league trend wise, it's still a good number. Also, if you listen to the Men in Red 97 podcasts, they had David Goss on talking about how most stadiums are built presently and that there's really not been much need for expansion of stadiums over the years. So historically and concurrently, everything looks appropriate. I think 22,000 is a good number. The other concern that has recently come up is, well, if it is only 22,000, then you have to pay for tickets. Prices are going to go up. There's going to be a limited amount and a growing demand then. Well, number one, that's better for businesses. And I'm talking from the Chicago Fire's perspective. And I'm not trying to say, like, we need to support them. We need to give them more money. That's not what I'm saying. But from a Chicago Fire perspective, it is better for business that they can then control the prices a little bit more, and maybe increase them a little, bring in. But what's encouraging is, yes, if the prices do go up, that is going to affect the individual fans, which sucks. However, again, I'm just going to hedge it a little. I'm not going to say I completely agree with it. We've seen that this is a club and an owner and an administration and management staff that will reinvest in the club and in the community and in the fans. So that is, I guess, maybe small comfort to some who might see ticket prices jump up by a certain percentage or a certain dollar amount, or season tickets become more limited. But that is a very, very valid concern. Counterpoint to that, again, we talked about how the club gives away a lot of tickets to youth organizations, youth clubs, other groups in the city, which is wonderful. They may be able to reduce the number of free tickets out there so that they can sell them for what's considered a reasonable or a current price. So that way they're not overinflating the prices. Hopefully there is a lot built up around that area where you can go and enjoy a game day experience without being in the stadium. If they have some restaurants, watch parties, how great would it be, to have your 22,000 people in the stadium and then another 5,000 people or so in the various restaurants and bars and parks watching the game, listening to the crowd, celebrating outside, or going playing games outside, just being a part of the neighborhood and the game day experience. I think that would be great. So there's a lot that was discussed. I think the ticket number, the number of seats is good. I think that the pricing is going to work itself out. I do think that this is a club that is cognizant of wanting to support the fans, so that they aren't going to try to start selling, $200 upper deck tickets just because they can and someone will pay for it. We all know the issues with resale markets, ticket fees and prices and all that sort of thing. So I think the club is cognizant of all of that. And I don't think it's going to be something ridiculous where we see huge increases in prices. But it could happen. Who knows? I don't have any sort of internal insight or insider information on this, but just from everything we've seen and everything we've been hearing, it seems like the club is going to make sure that it is a great game day experience, which does include having ticket prices at a reasonable amount. That is something we see on the game day surveys that they send out to anyone who attends games, that they're asking about value, that they're asking about pricing. So I think they are very cognizant of all of that. And I would encourage everyone to go try and find the link for the survey about the new stadium. It's getting some flack because it's being conducted by a third party that really doesn't know soccer. At least that's the criticism. And some of the questions seem kind of stupid. Like, would you pay $200 for a field side ticket? And so I think that's what's also kind of driving some of the people's fears about increased ticket prices. But that is, or $200 for a supporter section ticket if it meant you were by the field, something like that. I haven't read the full survey yet myself, but that's also kind of starting to drive some of the fears that people have with it. So that's the stadium talk. Again, this is going to be a continued conversation for the next 4 years, probably the 3 to build it and the first year in it. So we'll keep talking about it. We'll keep having fun with it, and we'll keep interacting with all of you via social media and email. Also, Dan, I want to just say thank you for your last bit in the email here. He says, I like your sponsor. I went to Iceland in January 2024, and their tap water was from the glaciers. It was seriously the best tap water I've ever had. So that's fantastic. He loves Skira, says it's much better than Liquid Death that he's tried. So thank you, Dan. Thank you for the communication. Thanks for kicking off our discussion here on the stadium talk and continuing the discussion on the new stadium announcement, as well as your support for our sponsor, Skira Icelandic Spring Water, available at your local 7-Eleven. Now let's look ahead to the Chicago Fire's next matchup, a June 7th, Saturday evening matchup against DC United. Now, if you recall, the Chicago Fire took on DC back on March 1st, 2-2 draw. We saw Kuipers score. Actually, let me back up. We saw Benteke score in the 4th minute after just a defensive lapse and really kind of set things on the back heel. But Kuipers levels in the 30th, puts them ahead in the 71st. But then it's Morel in 90+6 with the bike from the corner of the box, loops over Brady's head, and they get the last gasp point on the road there. So it was a depressing finish for a good game played by the Fire, despite having the minority of possession, shots on goal, passes. Like they did not win the statistical part of this game in any sense of the matter. And there were long stretches of this game where the fans were very frustrated. But we have 2 completely different teams now. The Fire are now sitting 11th on 22 points. The Fire have, in 15 games, 6 wins, 5 losses, and 4 draws. However, on the road, 5 wins and 4 losses. DC, however, is 1 below the Fire in the standings. They're sitting 12th, but only on 18 points after 17 games. So the Fire have a couple games in hand on every team in the Eastern Conference except for New England, who they played in US Open Cup, which I believe is the reason why they haven't played as many games as the rest of the league yet. DC United, 4 wins, 7 losses, 6 draws. But at home, 2 wins, 3 losses, 4 draws. DC, though, here's the thing. The Chicago Fire have an even goal differential. They have scored 28, allowed 28. DC United has a negative 13 goal differential, scored 16, and have allowed 29. So the defense for DC is shaky. It is the 3rd worst goals allowed in the Eastern Conference and the 4th worst goals scored in the Eastern Conference. So based on just those numbers, the offense and the defense, they are appropriately 4th from the bottom of the table in the East. Now, meanwhile, the Fire are probably in an appropriate position in the mix here with New England, New York City, and Charlotte between that 8 and 11 spot. But how will they match up against DC? These are easy points that the Fire need to take. I think they do need to win. And then if you take 4 points from a team, typically during that season, I would imagine you're going to finish ahead of them in the standings. So let's look at the head-to-head matchup here. Typically, across the season averages, DC is about 50% possession, the Fire about 47% possession. So pretty even there. The Fire are averaging 13 shots per game. So continuing our statistical comparison, the Fire and DC United over the course of the season actually have kind of similar stats on the season. So you would kind of expect them then from that sense to be similarly situated in the table. Now, sorry if that felt a little disjointed right there from the audio and the topic matter. I had my boss calling me to go over a file, so I had to pause the recording and resume. So apologies if it was a little disjointed there. But looking at DC United as a club, like we kind of have a sense of who their top players are going to be. But let's run through it so we know who we can identify as the threats that the defense need to look out for. On the goal scoring side, Christian Benteke leads the club. He's got 6 goals on the season. Then, with 2 goals on the season, João Peglo, Jose Kajima, and Gabriel Pirani. They are the next 3 highest scorers. Then you have 4 players with a single goal each. William Antley, Boris Enow, Lucas McNaughton, and Jacob Morel. The only goal he has scored, that ridiculous bicycle kick against the Chicago Fire. From an assist standpoint, the best helpers on the team, David Schnegg has 4 assists, Gabriel Pirani and Aaron Herrera each with 3. Then you have a number of players with 2 and 1 assists. But if you want to look at key passes, which are passes leading to a goal scoring opportunity, you've got Aaron Herrera and David Schnegg with 29 and 21 each. So for comparison's sake, let's go take a look at the Chicago Fire's key players here. Obviously, we know Kuipers is leading the way with goals on 10. Zinkernagel's got 6. Guti's got 5. And then you have a handful of other players with 2 and 1. As far as assists go, it's Zinkernagel and Bamba with 6. Gutman with 4. Kuipers, Haile Selassie, Jonathan Dean, and Jack Elliott with 2, and then a handful of players with 1. That's somewhere where I think Gutierrez can improve. He's only got 1 assist on the season. But for key passes, Zinkernagel's got 30. Bamba's got 23. So as far as, guys playing to that sense, if you look at the key pass stat, again, kind of similar movement there. But who's the top team in the Eastern Conference? Philadelphia, or I should say, who's got the highest goals scored for them in the Eastern Conference right now? It's Miami. Let's take a look at Miami as a club to see how their player statistics stand up against, say, DC and the Fire. And again, I'm only doing this not because it's Messi in Miami, but because they've scored the most goals. So if we're going to compare it to the top team in the league, let's figure it out here. So as far as key passes go, their top players are Messi and Jordi Alba with 28 and 20 key passes. And if we go to the top club in the Eastern Conference, Philadelphia, as far as standings go, let's see who their top contributing players or playmakers would be from a key pass standpoint. It would be Kai Wagner and Quinn Sullivan with 39 and 34 key passes. So those are some of the numbers of comparison where the Fire and DC United are compared to some of the top teams as far as creating opportunities and creating goal scoring chances there. Now, how is DC United looking from a momentum perspective? Let's take a look at their schedule, see their recent run of form, and see if that can bode well for the Chicago Fire as well. So over their last 3 games, they have won away to Cincinnati 2-1, drawn at home to New England 1-1, lost at home to the Red Bulls 2-0. They lost on PKs to Charlotte on the U.S. Open Cup match earlier in the month, and then a couple of draws as well. They've had a busy month. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 games in the month of May, if you include the 2 U.S. Open Cup games that they played. For comparison's sake, the Chicago Fire, I'd imagine, are going to be a little bit more fresh. They have only played 7 matches in the month of May, including 2 U.S. Open Cup matches. So Fire, a little bit more fresh. They are coming off a trip to Orlando, hot, humid match from last weekend, but they did win that one 3-1. If there are concerns about Joe Bamba, like there were in that Orlando game, maybe you'll see him get some reduced minutes, or maybe Haile Selassie starts and Bamba comes in late. Something that I think a lot of people would be okay with. Statistically, Bamba has dropped off a little bit, as well as saving some of his legs. Love him as a late game option to kind of kill off games or spark an attack. When he gets wide and spreads the field both horizontally and vertically, it really helps out the Chicago Fire's attack, and he's someone that could come in late game and kill things off. But here's the other factor that you have to take into account starting to come up this June, this summer international window. There are 140 MLS players who will be called up to international duty for World Cup qualifiers, Gold Cup matches, and friendlies. For the Chicago Fire, there are 4 players that have been called up. Chris Brady makes the Gold Cup roster in place of the injured Patrick Schulte. Chris Cupps makes the USA under-17 roster. Amari Glasgow gets called up for Guyana, and Sergio Orahel gets called up for the men's US U20 team. So we've got 4 guys, including 2 regular starters in Brady and Orahel, and 2 contributors in Cupps and Glasgow who are going to be out. So we're going to be seeing the Fire's bench tested during the course of June. As far as DC, and I don't know if these guys are going to be available. I don't think Brady's going to be available this weekend. I don't think any of these guys are going to be available this weekend against DC. But as far as their players who are out, Boris Inau is off to Cameroon, Christian Fletcher, US U20s, Aaron Herrera, Guatemala, Maddie Potola, Finland, and Kai Rolls for Australia. So they are missing a few of their key players, as well as some depth pieces as well. That being said, I think the Fire do go to DC. I think they do get it done, and I think the Fire are going to walk away with a 2-1 victory in DC. The Fire have been unable to keep a lot of clean sheets this year, but I think they are the better offensive team. It wouldn't surprise me if they continue their streak of early goals, and maybe you see 3 or 4-1 against a struggling DC United team. But I do think the Fire will score at least 2. I don't think DC is good enough to score 2 to draw, and I think the Fire come back with 3 points, and they continue their climb up the standings into that play-in game range. So with that, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, for listening. Please, again, rate, review, like, subscribe, share the show, go to your 7-Eleven, grab a bottle of Skira. Let's go Fire, and enjoy all the matches this weekend, everyone. Thanks.